Let me tell you something, history is not made by the timid, it is not written by those who sit on the sidelines waiting for permission. History is made by nations, by people, by leaders who dare to step into the arena and show the world that they will no longer play by someone else's rules. And today, we talk about a moment when India made a move so bold, so daring, that it shook the very balance of power across the globe. America, the world's most dominant force, stood speechless. The world didn't just watch, the world was stunned. Because this wasn't just a move on the chessboard of politics, it was a declaration of strength, self-belief, and destiny. Most nations live for decades, even centuries, repeating the same routines, following the same patterns, and staying inside the same boundaries that others have drawn for them. They get comfortable, they accept the limits, and they convince themselves that this is how things are meant to be. They are told who is strong, who is weak, who leads, and who follows. And for years, India was expected to play that role of the follower, the secondary player, the country that would never rise above the shadow of greater powers. But then came the moment when India decided enough was enough. And that decision was not born out of arrogance. It was born out of courage, out of the realization that history only remembers the daring, not the obedient. Breaking the pattern takes more than resources, more than strategy. It takes a kind of inner fire that refuses to accept the rules written by someone else. Think about it. The world order is like a massive chessboard where powerful nations try to control every square. For too long, India was expected to play the role of the pawn, moving slowly, cautiously, one step at a time. But India showed that it was not a pawn, it was capable of being the queen, capable of moving in every direction with force and precision. That is what stunned America and the rest of the world. India didn't just play the game, it changed the game, and that is a lesson for all of us. Too often in life we accept roles assigned to us by society, by tradition, by those who think they know better. We accept limits because we are told that is all we can do. But the truth is, those limits exist only until we find the courage to break them. Breaking the pattern means saying no when everyone expects you to say yes. It means standing tall when the world pressures you to bow. It means daring to act differently, even when people laugh, even when they doubt, even when they threaten you for not obeying the status quo. India's move was more than a political decision. It was a statement to every nation, every individual, every leader. The future belongs to those who are brave enough to step outside of the old blueprint and write a new one. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is action in spite of fear. America was left speechless not because India had more weapons or more money, but because India dared to do what many thought impossible. It broke the chains of hesitation, it shattered the ceiling of expectation. Now imagine what this means on a personal level. Each of us has a pattern we are told to follow. Go to school, get a job, live a certain way, never question, never challenge. But history does not celebrate those who fit in. It celebrates those who break out. The courage to break the pattern is what turns ordinary into extraordinary, what turns small nations into great powers, what turns an individual from forgotten into unforgettable. India's daring step teaches us that you cannot rise if you only follow the path already paved for you. The greatest heights can only be reached by those who are willing to create a new path, even if that path is filled with obstacles, resistance, and doubt. So when we look at that moment where India shook the world, we see more than politics. We see a universal truth. That truth is this: if you want to transform your destiny, if you want to rise beyond what anyone imagines for you, you must find the courage to break the pattern. The world will resist, the powerful will criticize, and the doubters will laugh. But when you dare to take that bold step, when you refuse to let others decide your place in history, you don't just change your future, you change the future of everyone who comes after you. What shook the world about India's daring move was not just the act itself, but the foundation it stood upon. The power of self-reliance is greater than any weapon, greater than any alliance, greater than any speech that can be made on the world stage. When a nation decides that it will no longer depend on others for its security, its growth, or its future, that is when true transformation begins. And that is exactly what India demonstrated. For years, powerful nations believed they could hold India back by controlling its access to technology, by limiting its partnerships, by placing obstacles in its path. But instead of collapsing under those pressures, India learned, adapted, and built from within. That is the meaning of self-reliance, not waiting for the world to hand you tools, but creating your own tools, sharpening your own strength, and standing on your own feet. This principle applies to nations, but it also applies to individuals. Too many people wait for the perfect opportunity, the perfect mentor, the perfect support system to arrive before they take action. But the truth is, those things may never come. The truth is, the world is not in the business of giving you what you need on a silver platter. If you want to rise, if you want to command respect, you must take what you have and build something greater out of it. India did not wait for permission. India did not beg to be recognized. It decided to recognize itself first, and that is why America and the rest of the world were left speechless. Because there is nothing more unstoppable than a nation, or a person, that has built itself from the ground up with no strings attached. Self-reliance is not isolation. It is not cutting yourself off from the world. It is the exact opposite. It is preparing yourself so that when you stand among others, you stand as an equal, not as a dependent. It is building the kind of inner strength that allows you to negotiate, to partner, to cooperate without fear of losing your independence. India's bold move sent a message that it no longer needed to be treated as the junior partner in global affairs. It could stand shoulder to shoulder with the world's most powerful nations because it had built its power from within. That is the essence of respect. No one gives it to you. You earn it by proving that you can survive and thrive on your own terms. Think about the power of this idea in your own life. If you always depend on others to make decisions for you, to create opportunities for you, to lift you up when you fall, you will always live under their shadow. But the moment you take control of your own development, when you decide to build your own skills, your own knowledge, your own destiny, you shift the balance of power. Suddenly, no one can control you. Suddenly, no one can dictate how far you can go. That is the power of self-reliance. It is freedom in its purest form. India's move was not about showing aggression. It was about showing independence. And the world reacted with shock because they were not prepared for it. They were used to India being seen as a market, a follower, or an ally in waiting. They did not expect India to become a leader in its own right, to announce itself as a power built not on borrowed strength but on self-made capability. And that is why the lesson here is so important. Whether for a nation or an individual, waiting for validation from others is a trap. True greatness comes when you stop waiting and start creating. So when the world looked at India and saw it standing tall without leaning on anyone else, it forced every global power to rethink its assumptions. And when you, as an individual, choose to rely on yourself, to invest in your own growth, to trust your own strength, you will leave others just as stunned. Because self-reliance is not just survival, it is the ultimate form of power. When we talk about power, most people immediately imagine armies, missiles, and massive displays of force. They think of size, numbers, and sheer might. But in today's world, real power is no longer defined only by strength in the traditional sense. Real power comes from innovation, the ability to think differently, to act unpredictably, and to create solutions that no one else can see coming. This is why India's daring move left America speechless. It was not just about showing force, it was about showing brilliance. It was about using intellect, creativity, and bold thinking as weapons more powerful than any arsenal. Innovation is the art of surprising the world, and India did just that. When you innovate, you break away from the old playbook. You refuse to follow the outdated instructions written by others who came before you. Instead, you write your own rules, and that is what made India's action so stunning. It wasn't expected. America and other world powers had grown accustomed to predictable moves, predictable patterns, and predictable behaviors from the rest of the world. They were confident they knew how the game would play out. But India rewrote the game by doing something unexpected, something creative, something that showed the world that power is no longer just about who has the most resources. It's about who can use their resources the most intelligently. Innovation is not easy. It requires risk. It requires stepping into the unknown, daring to try something that has never been tried before, daring to succeed where everyone else predicted failure. That is why it is so powerful. Because innovation is not just an action, it is a mindset. It is the mindset that says, we will not be trapped by old limitations. We will not accept the world as it is. We will shape the world into what it can be. India's innovation was not simply technological or political, it was psychological. It told the entire planet, do not underestimate us, do not assume we will follow, do not assume you know our next move. And that shock, that unpredictability, is one of the greatest strengths any nation or any individual can possess. Think of how this applies to your own life. If you do what everyone else is doing, if you follow the same old patterns, if you only repeat what has already been proven, you will never stand out. You will never shock the world. But the moment you innovate, the moment you take an unconventional path, the moment you create something no one else dared to create, you immediately become powerful, people notice, people respect you. And just like America was left speechless in the face of India's daring innovation, the people around you will be forced to pay attention when you do something they thought was impossible. History is filled with examples of how innovation changed the balance of power. Empires collapsed not because they were weaker in size, but because they failed to adapt. New nations rose not because they were richer, but because they dared to invent, to think ahead, to surprise their rivals with ideas no one else could imagine. India understood this truth, and when it acted, it proved that the greatest weapon in the 21st century is not fear. It is imagination, imagination backed by courage, imagination backed by execution. That is innovation in its purest form. So when we talk about innovation as a weapon, we are talking about a force that destroys predictability, a force that makes even the strongest hesitate, a force that can change the future overnight. And India showed the entire world that it is willing to wield this weapon. That is why the balance of power was shaken, and that is why anyone who wants to rise, whether a nation, a company, or a person, must understand this truth. Innovation is not optional, it is survival, it is dominance. It is the ultimate key to leaving your rivals speechless. India's daring move did not come out of nowhere. It was not a sudden spark without preparation. It was the product of years, even decades, of resilience. The world often forgets that before any great success, there are countless failures, countless obstacles, countless moments of pressure that test the strength of a nation or of a person. India's rise was no exception. For years it was underestimated. For years it was placed under sanctions, criticized by global powers, told what it could not do, told where it did not belong. Many nations would have crumbled under such pressure. Many would have accepted defeat and stayed small. But India did not. Instead, it endured, it adapted, and it grew stronger with every challenge. That is resilience in action, not the absence of struggle, but the refusal to be broken by it. Resilience is one of the most powerful qualities in the world because it transforms weakness into strength. Every time India faced resistance, it learned something new. Every time it was denied access to resources or partnerships, it turned inward and built its own. Every setback was converted into training. Every failure became a stepping stone. And this is the hidden truth. Resilience is not about surviving one battle. It is about preparing for the war that lasts a lifetime. When the time finally came for India to make its daring move, it did not rise unprepared. It rose battle-hardened, strengthened by years of resistance, carrying scars that had become armor. That is why the world was stunned. It had underestimated the power of resilience. Think about your own life. How many times have you faced obstacles and thought, this is the end? How many times have setbacks made you question your worth, your ability, or your future? The lesson here is simple. Setbacks are not signs that you are finished. They are signs that you are being forged into something stronger. Resilience is the process by which struggle becomes fuel and pain becomes progress. If India had surrendered to the doubt and criticism it faced, the story would be very different. But because it endured, because it kept moving forward even in the darkest times, it reached a point where it could shock the most powerful nation in the world. Resilience is also about patience. Power is not built overnight. Respect is not earned in a single day. It takes time, it takes persistence, it takes the willingness to keep standing even when there is no applause, even when the world seems blind to your effort. India did not rise because it had everything handed to it. It rose because it refused to quit when it had nothing, and when you think about it, that is the true test of resilience, not how strong you are when everything is going well, but how determined you remain when everything is going against you. The spirit of resilience also creates something even more valuable than strength, credibility. When the world saw India rise, it could not dismiss it as luck. It could not say this was a temporary achievement. The world knew this power was real because it had been tested again and again and had survived. That is the beauty of resilience. No one can take it away from you. No one can deny it, because resilience is proven over time, and time is the ultimate judge. So when we talk about India's daring move, we are really talking about decades of resilience that built up to that moment. And when we look at our own lives, we must understand that resilience is not just about bouncing back. It is about rising higher every single time, about refusing to stay down, about turning every failure into preparation for your greatest victory. That is what India showed the world. That is why America was speechless. Because resilience, when practiced with discipline and belief, is not just survival, it is destiny. When India made its daring move, the world did not just see an act of national pride, it witnessed the beginning of a new chapter in global history. For decades, the global order seemed fixed, as if carved into stone. One nation sat at the top, others followed, and the rest accepted their roles as supporting players in the theater of power. But what happens when a nation refuses to stay in the background? What happens when a country that was once seen as developing, as struggling, as dependent, suddenly takes a step that forces the world to pay attention? The entire order shifts. This is exactly what India did. And it is why America, long accustomed to being the unquestioned voice of authority, was left speechless. Because in that moment, the balance of power was no longer about dominance. It became about competition, about equality, about the arrival of new forces willing to challenge the status quo. Redefining the global order is not about replacing one superpower with another. It is not about simply flipping the roles. It is about breaking the illusion that one or two nations alone can decide the destiny of the world. India's bold action reminded every country, big or small, that the future belongs to those who are willing to act with courage and conviction. It told the world that influence is not something you are given, it is something you seize. And once you seize it, the game changes for everyone. The monopoly is broken, the assumptions collapse, and a new kind of competition begins. That is why the move was so historic. Not only did it raise India's stature, but it forced the world to reconsider the entire system of global power. This lesson is bigger than politics. It speaks to life itself. How many times have you been told to stay in your lane? How many times have people tried to put you in a box, to define your limits, to tell you what role you are meant to play? That is the old order, that is the script written for you by others, but when you decide to break out of that box, when you choose to write your own script, you are not just changing your life, you are changing the rules for everyone who comes after you. You redefine what is possible. You show others that the old hierarchy is not permanent, that the world can be reshaped by those who dare to take bold steps. India's move is proof that global power is no longer about who has the loudest voice, but about who has the courage to use their voice differently. It is no longer about who has the most resources, but about who has the vision to use them in ways that others never imagined. America's silence in that moment was not weakness, it was shock. Shock at the realization that the era of unilateral dominance is fading, and the era of multipolar power is rising. That is the world India stepped into, not as a follower but as a leader. And leadership at that level is not granted, it is earned through courage, resilience, and innovation. For individuals, the same principle applies. If you accept the roles others give you, you will always live in their shadow. But the moment you redefine yourself, the moment you prove that you are not just another player but a force to be reckoned with, you change the dynamics around you, people treat you differently, opportunities open. Respect follows, and just like India redefined the global order, you can redefine your personal order, your environment, your destiny. So when the world witnessed India's daring step, it did more than applaud or criticize. It recalibrated, it adjusted its vision of the future, it realized that a new chapter had begun, a chapter where the global stage is not controlled by one voice, but shaped by many. That is what redefining the order truly means. It is not the end of the game, but the beginning of a new one, and the winners will be those who dare to step forward with strength and belief. And so, when we look at this moment in history, India's daring move that left America speechless, we see more than just a political act. We see a living lesson in courage, in self-reliance, in innovation, in resilience, and in the power to redefine the order of the world itself. This was not just about one country rising. It was about the spirit of determination that can lift any nation, any person, beyond the limits placed upon them. It was proof that the future does not belong to those who wait, to those who obey, to those who cling to the safety of the old ways. The future belongs to those who dare. India dared to break the pattern. It dared to rely on its own strength. It dared to innovate when no one expected it. It dared to endure through decades of struggle, and it dared to stand tall enough to reshape the global order. That is the formula of greatness, that is the mindset of champions, and that is the path for anyone who dreams of leaving a mark on this world. So I say to you, learn from this moment. Do not let others define your limits. Do not accept the role they assign you. Do not wait for permission to rise. If India can shake the world, so can you. If a nation can turn doubt into dominance, so can an individual. But you must have the courage, the discipline, and the vision to take that step. Because the truth is simple, history is not made by those who play it safe. History is made by those who dare to act, who dare to build, who dare to dream on a scale so bold that the world has no choice but to be left speechless.